The Falcons are unveiling new unis in April. Will it be an innovative new design or just a blatant ripoff of a division rival?
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Locked On Falcons, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network in the galaxy. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. So if you don't know me, I'm your humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew. Been covering the Atlanta Falcons for 2 decades, formerly at FalcFans.com. RIP. Still going strong here on Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. And on today's daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, I'm going to put my issues aside and we are going to talk about jerseys. We're going to talk about the Falcons' new uniforms and the rumors, if their red primary jerseys are going to be too reminiscent of a heated rival. We'll talk about how nostalgia seems to be a big factor in potentially the new design, as well as the need for more alternate jerseys. But the Falcons teased today on Monday, March 2nd, that they will be unveiling new uniforms on Thursday, April 2nd. And of course, great timing. That usually means that me and Jarvis can get up to our usual shenanigans to wrap up that week going into April. And it makes sense for the Falcons to be breaking out new jerseys in this particular year. It's 2026, 60 years from when the Falcons began in 1966. You have a brand new regime. So you're trying to sort of, be like, this is a new era and is a big part of the marketing firm. So the time seems to be right for, you have the historic factor, 60 years, as well as the new era. So the marketing speaks for itself. But, a lot of what we'll talk about on today is based off of some tweets from Zach Cohen, who's kind of been on it with the Falcons, since December in terms of coming out with new jerseys this year. And sort of he's been hinting around some of the rumors and some of the leaks that he has been privy to and things that he has been hearing. But based off of what Zach is saying, like, it doesn't sound like the Falcons are going to really do much changes to their helmets. It's going to remain black, same logo. Maybe there's going to be a recoloring of the face mask or something like that. But, ultimately 99% of people won't even notice that. And it really feels like the big change that's going to happen with the new jersey is just going to be a new look for their primary home jersey, which sounds like, and we'll see if this winds up holding up to scrutiny, but it sounds like the Falcons are moving from black as their primary home jersey to red. And the one issue I have with that is, or the main issue I have with that, I probably have multiple issues, but the main issue I have with that is, from the sounds of it, it sounds like it's just going to basically be very reminiscent of what the Bucs jerseys look like currently, but instead of having pewter as the Bucs accent color, it'll be black for the Atlanta Falcons, right? Because when you look at the Bucs home and away jerseys, right, their away jerseys a white jersey, as most teams in the NFL have white jerseys, right? They have red numbers and no stripes, and that sounds like what the Falcons will be having as well. And the Bucs home jerseys are a red jersey with white numbers and no stripes on the sleeve, and that sounds like what the Falcons are also going with. That stripe factor is going to be from what it sounds like, the main differentiator. If those jerseys have stripes or not, the Bucs jerseys currently do not really have stripes. Lots of NFL teams, typically, that's sort of the traditional look, is to have stripes on the sleeves. But we'll see if the Falcons stick with that. And it does feel like the Falcons are, trying to play a little bit off of the nostalgia, a little bit with throwback to, the 80s and early 2000s when they did have a red primary home jersey. And, I've personally always been partial to black as their primary color as opposed to red. But since they've gone back to the black jerseys as their primary starting in 2020, the team hasn't been successful. And when you understand Arthur Blank, he bought the team in 2002. They made the switch to new jerseys in 2003, kept that for 17 seasons. And that was the most successful, era of Falcons football ever, right? And so if you're the owner of the team, maybe you're a little nostalgic for the good old days when the red jerseys were the team's made jersey in the Vick years, in the Matt Ryan years, throughout those prime years, and you're trying to harken back to that. And that's what it feels like. That's what is going on with these new ones. And sort of all the team's successful seasons, obviously, 8-year playoff drought. So, obviously they've been with the current jersey for 6 years. They're trying to get back to the good old days when Matt Ryan was here. And of course, now that Matt Ryan is back in the building, it does make a little bit of sense in that respect. But hopefully when they unveil those jerseys in April, we will be able to see a marked difference in what their jerseys look like than what the Bucs jerseys. Not to say that the Bucs jerseys are bad or anything. Like, there's a perfectly fine jerseys. It's just like, but another team in your division already has those jerseys. And so it's just like, are you just going to look the same except for, depending on when you're home or away or whatever. And there's not going to be a whole lot of difference between that. And that's, I guess my issue, but I'm sure plenty of people will be like, that ain't no problem. That ain't no problem. So we'll dive a little bit more into then how nostalgia plays into this, sort of the jerseys that I'm personally nostalgic for, as well as, the need for more alternate looks. The Falcons don't really, embrace their alternates all that much other than the red helmet throwbacks. And we'll talk about maybe they need that will be hopefully one change that they can make with this new jersey as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth, and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment today. And the pressure is always high in the NFL, and so it is in your workplace with deadlines, overflowing inboxes, and that one position you have to fill sitting open. When the pressure is on and you need the right hire, Indeed is all you need. Indeed sponsored jobs helps you reach the right people who actually fit what you're looking for, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. Over the next minute that I'm talking to you, companies like yours will have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. So it is now March, and we know that college basketball won't stop, can't stop, won't stop. There are big games, tight spreads, and momentum swings every single night. From early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on the board. And now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with college basketball parlay profit boost. You can build any college hoops parlay you want, whether it involves rivalry games, ranked matchups, whatever you like. You can mix spreads, totals, and player props to match how you see the slate playing out. And then you can apply your profit boost and instantly bump up your potential payout. Go safe, go bold, ride with the team you've been following all season, or just jump on the bandwagon for the hot hand. It's your parlay, your style, just now with more upside behind it. So head on over to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game. So, as we discussed, like, this is a throwback to the early 2000s. And I think there's a lots of nostalgia for that. And so I think these will be well received if that's the direction that the Falcons are going. I know a large percentage of my audience started being Falcon fans in the early 2000s during the Vick years. That's when they became Falcon fans. So they're very nostalgic to those old school jerseys that the Falcons had from 03 to 2019. For me personally, and again, this is going to be my unpopular take of the day, they're my least favorite Falcon jerseys of all time. I feel like for me personally, they were just kind of a ripoff of the Texans expansion uniforms to me, just with black instead of blue. And so that's why I seem like I'm making a big deal about this is the new jerseys will just be a ripoff of the Bucs, and the old jerseys were a ripoff of the Texans. That's why I kind of like the current jerseys because they're unique and now they're polarizing. We'll circle back to that. But in terms of nostalgic for me, when I first became a Falcon fan, that was in the 1990s. And so I have a soft spot for those old school jerseys, the black tops, and the gray pants, right? And the gray pants for a long time in Atlanta were sort of the norm in the 80s and 90s, and they've gone away from that. I don't know why. Is it because it's too reminiscent of Georgia, or is it just nowadays very few teams outside of teams that actually have gray or silver as one of their main colors, rocks gray pants nowadays? Is just sort of out of touch or no longer in vogue or whatever. You guys tell me. But I would love to see an alternate version of the Falcons jerseys. I don't think that will be their primary, nor do I think it should be their primary sort of gray pants or whatever. But I would love to see them go back and rock the gray pants in addition to the red helmets as their throwback. Not the gray pants with the red helmets, but just like the black, the old school 90s with the black helmets, the old school logo, the black primaries, and then the gray pants. I would love to see that just one time as an alternate, right? Because that old school, that 90s throwback, the last time the Falcons wore that, they were in the playoffs, like 2016 to 2017. They wore those 90s throwbacks. They didn't have gray pants, but they had the white pants with those old school 90s throwbacks. And, is it a coincidence that the Falcons haven't made a playoff since then? Probably not. No, I'm kidding. They did wear the 90s throwbacks in those years, but they also wore them in 2018, 2019, and 2020 as their alternate. So it's not just solely once they got rid of those, they stopped winning games and making the playoffs. That's not actually true. But, the red helmets became their primary throwback starting in 2022. They did dabble with it in previous years. And I'm getting a lot of my research from gridiron-uniforms.com. It's fun going down the rabbit hole there. But going back and looking at the gradients, right? I feel like a lot of the negativity towards the current version of the Falcons jerseys are related to the gradients, right? And then I went back and looked it up, and it was the Falcons were 2-1 with the gradients, right? The only loss they had was that 2020 loss to the Lions on the last second throw, right? They would have been undefeated with the gradients if I forget who blew that coverage. I think it was Foye Oluokun, but because then he had the pick in the ensuing win over the Lions in the final second as a redemption. But until you do right by the gradients, Atlanta Falcons, you'll never have. No, I'm kidding. But it'll be interesting to sort of see the reception for these new uniforms, because my recollection back when they unveiled the current new uniforms in 2020, they were generally positive. Right. Obviously it wasn't universally positive, but it was generally positive. But it did feel to me the tide turned really quickly on the jerseys. Within 2 or 3 years, people were these are the worst jerseys in the NFL. And I was just oh, that's interesting. Because I remember during that all season, a lot of people thought, oh, the Falcons of the 4 or 5 teams that unveiled new jerseys that year were in the top 2 or 3 of that all season. And then all of a sudden, everybody just hated it. And I think the gradients had a lot to do with it. Right, they were always polarizing from the jump. I like the gradients to a certain extent. Again, they're unique and whatnot, but it did feel I think they kind of poisoned the well against the general Falcons uniforms and whatnot. My main beef, I've said this before in the podcast and elsewhere, my main beef with the current jerseys is the font with the numbers. The 1s and the 7s look exactly the same, and I think it was back in 21 when they were rotating centers and they had Matt Hennessy and Drew Dahlman rotating in and out of the lineup, and Hennessy was 61 and Dahlman was 67, and you're I couldn't tell who was in the game just by jersey. That's my biggest beef with the current jerseys. I never had a beef with the gradients or anything like that. I always liked the gradients, but I do remember when they did come out with the 2020 jerseys, they had an alternate that had red pants, and they never wore the red pants with the white jersey, right? And they've only then going back and doing the research, the only time the Falcons have ever worn red pants with their jerseys was during the Color Rush season in 2017, right? When they had the red on red, right? They have black on black, white on white, white on black, black on white, all that sort of stuff, and obviously the gray pants as well. But they've never had red pants, and I'll be curious if they do have an alternate that has red pants this time, right? I'm a fan of having different alternate jerseys just for the novelty factor, even if they're not popular. It's just like, it's kind of the selling point to me of having jerseys is the different novelty that factor that you have with different combinations of jerseys, where you could be like the Chargers and you have like 17 different combinations, or the Ravens who have like 17 different combinations of jerseys and whatnot, depending on, black on, white, black, purple, gold, all that stuff, blue for the Chargers, all that stuff, like different shades of blue and all that stuff. And I feel like the Falcons should embrace more alternate jerseys. Obviously the red helmet throwbacks should be their primary alternate that they break out, a couple of times every year for, specific matchups. But I think every now and then they should just like sprinkle in a home game, right? That, has like red pants or something like that, or a road game that has like gray or red pants or something like that. Just to be a little different, just to have it look a little different is kind of my thoughts on it. So we'll see if the Falcons embrace that. But, we got through it. Right. I'm infamous for being someone that's like, I don't care about jerseys. It's not that I don't care. It's just like my level of caring is not the same as everybody else's level of caring. Like on a 10-point scale, if your average Falcon fan cares about the jerseys, like at a 6 to a 10, somewhere in that range, like I care about it like at a 2 or a 3. So it's not that I don't care. It's just like, I don't care nearly as much as other people do. But going down this rabbit hole, doing the research, was interesting. It was like, okay, like, it's not something that like I'm emotional about, but it is one of those things that like intellectually I'm curious to see what new looks the Falcons unveil. Is it going to be kind of a throwback to the early 2000s or the 1980s or the 1990s? What are they trying to invoke with this? I'll be very curious to see what they wind up doing on April. So, I am curious and invested in the new jerseys. We'll see what's what on that front when it comes to the new jerseys a month from now. So continue to make Locked On Falcons your first listen. I don't know how many more jersey-based and uniform-based episodes we're going to have between now and then. I'm sure we'll get at least one more in between now and April 2nd. But continue to make Locked On Falcons if, not only you are looking forward to that one episode where we talk about uniforms, as well as, the free agent stuff that is upcoming. We're going to start getting into looking ahead to some of the free agent options, and similar to the conversation that we had with quarterbacks in different buckets, we're going to try to break it down in different levels of like, big splash signings, mid-level signings, cheap, signings and all that sort of thing that the Falcons can get into. And maybe we'll start off with the wide receiver position, one of the bigger need positions for the Falcons on tomorrow's episode. So look forward to that. And that's going to do it for us. Continue to make us your first listen on YouTube or wherever you check out podcasts. Of course, check out Locked On NFL, Locked On NFL Draft, as well as so many other shows across the Locked On Podcast Network. And check out the Everydayer Club. There is no off season. Get an ad-free version of Locked On Falcons, premium Discord access, and you can get a free month by heading to the link in the description below by using that coupon code Free Agency, a free month of the Everydayer Club. So you can knock $5 off per month for 1 month, or get a discount on that $50 per year as well. So it is all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.